Now to the verdict just a short time ago in the case of that husband and father in Virginia, accused of killing his wife so he could have a new life with his au pair. The jury finding him guilty on all counts just moments ago, and here's Mola Lengi.
Tonight, a Virginia jury finding Brendan Banfield guilty of murdering his wife and a stranger as part of an elaborate plot to start a new life with the family's au pair.
He stood in that courtroom, looked the judge in the eye, and said, "I loved her very much." The same man who spent months planning her murder. The same man who used his own 4-year-old daughter as part of the plan. The same man who lured a complete stranger to his house and made sure that stranger would never leave. And when the judge looked him dead in the face and called him evil, he showed no emotion. None. Not a flinch. Not a tear. Nothing. His name is Brendan Banfield, and by the time this story is over, you will understand exactly what kind of man is capable of saying, "I loved her," about the woman he stabbed to death. Stay with me, because the details of this case will stay with you. Welcome to Beyond Dark Cases, where every unsolved case has a truth buried inside it. Unexplained disappearances, unresolved crimes. We dive into cases that were forgotten and left without justice. We do not let these cases go cold. Subscribe and lock in with us. Christine and Brendan Banfield met when they were 18 years old. Freshman year of college. They were together from that moment, through their first jobs, their first house, a move from New York down to Virginia, the birth of their daughter Valerie. Nearly 20 years of a shared life built side by side. From the outside, they looked like a family that had figured it out. Brendan worked as a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, a federal law enforcement job that came with a badge, a service weapon, and a level of authority he clearly enjoyed carrying. Christine worked as a pediatric intensive care nurse at Innova Fairfax, pulling 12.5-hour shifts, caring for the sickest children in the unit. During the height of the pandemic, she volunteered for extra shifts. She signed up for vaccination clinics. She showed up when other people could not. Her sister Danielle described her as the kind of person who made everyone around her feel comfortable, and without even trying. She was a resident advisor in college, always looking for ways to help. She was the one who remembered things, who showed up, who gave her time freely even when she had nothing left to give. The kind of nurse her patients' parents never forgot. Danielle also described what it felt like to grow up alongside her. They were nearly 4 years apart, but got mistaken for twins constantly. They grew up in a loud Italian household where you ate macaroni, not pasta, and sauce, not gravy. Sundays with grandparents. Saturday nights waiting up for their father to come home from his late shift, watching Saturday Night Live. Eating hot bagels he picked up on the way. Christine falling asleep anywhere. At concerts, in the car, mid-sentence.
Everybody, rock your body right. Back streets back, alright.
Danielle said that when she looks in the mirror now, sometimes she sees her sister's face first, and then in a flash, she is gone. That is the person this case is about. Before we go any further, that is who Christine was. Now, Brendan. Brendan had been cheating on Christine since before they were married. He said so himself, on the stand, under oath, with her family sitting in that courtroom. He described himself almost proudly as someone who had multiple affairs over the years. Someone whose job required travel, and who took full advantage of the freedom that gave him. Christine had found out about 2 of those affairs. They went to couples therapy. They stayed together. Life continued. By the time they settled in Herndon, Virginia, both of their schedules had become demanding enough that full-time childcare was no longer optional. Daycare would not work. Christine's nursing shifts ran irregular hours, sometimes starting before daylight, sometimes ending well into the night. So they looked into au pairs, young people who come from other countries, live in the family home, and provide childcare in exchange for room, board, and a stipend. Through a cultural exchange program, they found Juliana Perez Magalhães. She was 21 years old from Brazil, warm and eager to please. She bonded quickly with Valerie. She got along well with Christine, who had taken her under her wing, helping her settle into a new country. One of Christine's friends even later described Juliana as bubbly, enthusiastic, reliable. Someone you would trust in your home without a second thought. She moved in. She became part of the household. And within months of her arrival, she was sleeping with Brendan Banfield. Brendan would later claim that Juliana made the first move, that she texted him while Christine and Valerie were away, showed him her dating app, described the kind of man she was looking for, and that he simply did not stop her when she walked into his bedroom. He told that story on the stand with a slight smile, like it was something that happened to him rather than something he chose. What happened next, though, that part, he could not explain away, because the affair between Brendan and Juliana did not stay casual. It grew. They went on dates. They went dancing. They took a trip to New York together for New Year's Eve. Photos from that trip would later surface, the two of them in a bathtub, captions in Portuguese about being in love, Juliana posting about spending the new year with the hottest one. Brendan was not wearing his wedding ring in any of those photos. By the fall of 2022, Juliana believed they were building a future together, and Brendan, at least in those conversations that let her believe it. He told her he loved her. He told her the marriage was over in every way that mattered. He told her divorce was not an option. When Juliana asked why, he was direct. Money was involved. Custody was involved. He did not want to share Valerie. He did not want the financial consequences. He did not want his life pulled apart in a courtroom and examined. He wanted the outcome of a divorce, the freedom, the clean slate, the ability to move forward with Juliana without any of the costs that came with actually getting one. And so he arrived at a different solution. He decided Christine needed to die. Now, some people hear that and imagine a moment of rage, a fight that went too far, an impulse that a person immediately regrets. That is not what this was. What Brendan Banfield built was a plan, careful, layered, and designed from the beginning to make sure that when Christine was dead, he would be the last person anyone suspected. He thought about what could go wrong. He thought about how domestic murders get solved. He knew from his work in federal investigations exactly how law enforcement thinks, exactly what they look for, exactly how a guilty husband gets caught. And he built his plan around avoiding every single one of those traps. The first problem he needed to solve was motive. If Christine died and police looked at Brendan, they would find the affair almost immediately. A young woman living in the house, a husband with a history of cheating. That combination would point directly at him. So he needed to make sure that when Christine died, the story the police followed led somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that made him look like a victim rather than a suspect. The second problem was opportunity. He needed to be somewhere else, somewhere visible, somewhere documented. When it happened, he needed an alibi that held. and the third problem was the actual act of killing her. He could not do it himself in any way that looked personal. It needed to look like something that happened to Christine because of Christine, because of choices she made, because of a world she had chosen to enter that he knew nothing about. What he built to solve all three of those problems was, by any measure, one of the most cold-blooded setups this channel has ever covered. He and Juliana created a fake profile on a fetish website called FetLife. Using Christine's photographs and her identity, the account they built described a woman interested in violent, non-consensual role-play scenarios involving knives and home invasion fantasies. They spent weeks going through responses, looking not just for someone willing to participate, but for someone who fit a very specific set of requirements. They needed a man willing to show up at a stranger's house without meeting in person first. Someone who would not ask too many questions. Someone who would follow instructions. They found Joseph Ryan. Joseph Ryan was 39 years old. He had responded to the profile believing he was communicating with a consenting adult woman who had a specific fantasy she wanted to act out. The person behind the account, Brendan, posing as Christine, gave Ryan detailed instructions. Come on the morning of February 24th. The door will be unlocked. Come straight upstairs. Bring a knife. Do not stop even if I seem hesitant. That is part of the scene. Ryan followed those instructions to the letter. He brought a small kitchen knife. He arrived at the house believing he was walking into a planned consensual encounter with a woman who had carefully orchestrated every detail. He had no idea the woman whose photos he had been shown had never sent a single one of those messages. He had no idea she was asleep upstairs. Completely unaware he existed, he had no idea that the man who had been writing to him for weeks had chosen him specifically because he made a good target. Someone who could be framed. Someone whose presence in that house, under those circumstances, would immediately discredit him in the eyes of the public and potentially the police. Joseph Ryan was selected to be the fall guy. Brendan Banfield thought he would make a good dupe. Those are the words his own victim's mother used in that courtroom. And in one of the few places Brendan was genuinely wrong, Joseph Ryan was not forgotten. But we will get to that. In the weeks before February 24th, Brendan was not idle. He took Juliana to a shooting range and taught her how to fire a gun. He purchased a handgun separately from his service weapon. He had soundproof windows installed in the house, a detail that becomes harder to explain the longer you think about it. He researched the neighborhood security cameras. He made sure he understood exactly which angles were covered and which were not. On October 29th, 2022, the same day that Danielle, Christine's sister, came to visit for Halloween, while Christine and her sister and her mother spent the afternoon at fall events with Valerie, Brendan and Juliana were at a gun range, practicing. When Danielle found out about that during the trial, she said she went numb. She had been there that day. She had been used, without knowing it, to keep Christine busy, to keep Christine away from the house, to give Brendan and Juliana the time and space they needed to practice for the day they planned to kill her. Guilt, she said, is meant to be tied to a choice. She had not chosen any of this, but the weight of it still found her anyway. By February of 2023, the plan was in place. The date had been chosen. February 24th, the day after Brendan's birthday. A day Christine had originally been scheduled to work, but had requested off at the last minute. A day only she would have known was available, which is exactly what Brendan used to his advantage. because it made it look like she had planned the encounter herself. It made it look like she had picked that day, requested that day off work, arranged for Juliana to take Valerie to the zoo, all of it, just to have this man come to her house. Christine had actually planned the zoo trip herself weeks earlier as a treat for Valerie. She had bought the tickets and written it on the calendar in Juliana's schedule. The only thing Christine Banfield had planned for that morning, Tiny, was a good day for her daughter. The morning of February the 24th, 2023 arrived. Brendan left the house just after 7 in the morning. He drove to a nearby McDonald's. He ordered breakfast. He sat in that parking lot in Nakawu, and he waited for his phone to ring. Juliana loaded Valerie into the car. She parked down the street. She waited too. And Joseph Ryan pulled into the driveway of a house where a woman named Christine Banfield had no idea he was coming, walked through the unlocked front door and climbed the stairs. Joseph Ryan walked through the front door of that house at roughly 7:30 in the morning. The door was unlocked, just as the messages had told him it would be. He climbed the stairs. He went to the master bedroom, and what he found there was exactly what he had been told to expect. A woman, asleep, waiting for the scene they had arranged. What he could not have known was that none of it was real. The woman in that bed had not written a single word to him. She had not chosen him. She had not planned anything. Christine Banfield woke up that morning thinking it was a quiet day off, a day to rest before the zoo trip Juliana was taking Valerie on. She had no idea a stranger was in her house. She had no idea what her husband had set in motion. Downstairs, Brendan got the call he had been waiting for. Juliana, parked down the street with Valerie in the car, called to tell him Ryan had arrived and gone inside. Surveillance footage captured the moment at McDonald's. Brendan was in the bathroom. He came out with his phone to his ear. He walked to his car. He drove back to the house. He did not call 911. He did not call for backup. He drove home, parked, walked past the front door, which he did not want to use because the electronic lock made noise, went around to the back of the house, unlatched the gate, and let himself in through the basement door. His dog Lily was in the basement. She was frantic, spinning in circles, whining, not behaving the way she normally did when a family member came home. The dog had been locked down there. Her food bowl had been moved from its usual spot in the dining room and was spilled across the basement floor. Brendan stepped over the gate and went upstairs. Juliana had followed. Despite being told to stay in the car with Valerie, she came back to the house. She brought Valerie with her. She brought a 4-year-old child into a house where her mother was about to be killed and left that child in the basement. Brendan went up to the master bedroom. He pushed the door open with his foot. His service weapon was already drawn. What happened in that room in the next few minutes ended 2 lives. According to Juliana's testimony, Brendan entered the room and announced himself. Ryan looked up, startled, according to her account, clearly not expecting a man with a gun. Brendan shot Joseph Ryan in the head. Ryan did not die immediately. He was blinded. He was on the floor. He was still moving. And then Brendan turned to his wife. Christine had initially thought, in those first terrifying seconds, that her husband had come to help her, that he had arrived to stop what was happening. She thought he was there to save her. Juliana testified that Christine's first reaction when Brendan entered the room was relief. That relief did not last.
I was able to see him stabbing her.
Brendan got on top of his wife and began stabbing her in the neck, again and again and again. The medical examiner would later confirm the wound pattern. Christine tried to fight. Joseph Ryan's DNA was found under her fingernails, meaning in those final moments she was reaching out, grabbing, trying to survive. She told Brendan she could not see. She put her hand over her neck wound and asked him to help her. She said she loved him. Juliana, standing in that room, watching all of this, picked up the second gun, the one Brendan had purchased separately from his service weapon, the one she had practiced firing at the range, and shot Joseph Ryan in the chest, finishing what Brendan had started. Then they called 911. The first call came in at 7:47 in the morning. It lasted a few seconds and went dead. 13 minutes passed. Then the same phone called again. Juliana was on the line first, sounding distressed, barely coherent. Then Brendan took over. He told the dispatcher he had shot a man who had been attacking his wife. He identified himself as a law enforcement officer. He gave the address.
Hey, Paul, or Jose, you got that with You got that with watch out for that.
There's a dog back there.
When police arrived, the scene they found told a complicated story. Christine Banfield was alive, barely. She was taken by ambulance to a trauma hospital where she died. Joseph Ryan was declared dead at the scene. Brendan had a slight issue with his leg. He was taken to the hospital, treated, and released. He declined to speak to detectives about the death of his wife. That detail, that a husband whose wife had just been murdered in his home refused to talk to investigators, was noted, filed away. It would matter later. In the hours that followed, body camera footage captured Juliana outside the house, visibly shaken, asking officers repeatedly where Brendan was, asking if she could see him, asking if they would be in the same building. Her 4-year-old charge sat beside her, unaware of what had happened above her head. The story Brendan and Juliana gave that morning was simple. A stranger had broken in. Brendan came home to find his wife being attacked. He shot the intruder. He tried to save Christine but could not. It was a tragedy. It was a home invasion. Except there was no forced entry, not a single broken lock, not a window out of place, nothing to suggest Joseph Ryan had entered that house as anything other than a man who had been told the door would be open and walked right through it. The investigation that followed was long, complicated, and at certain points, genuinely messy in ways the defense would later try to use against the prosecution. Detectives began pulling apart the story from multiple angles simultaneously. They looked at Ryan's phone. They looked at Christine's devices. They interviewed people in Joseph Ryan's life, trying to understand who he was and how he had ended up in that bedroom. What they found on Ryan's phone was a trail of communication with a FetLife account that presented itself as Christine Banfield. The messages were detailed. They were specific. They included photographs of Christine. They gave Ryan step-by-step instructions for the encounter, what to bring, what to do, how to behave. And they showed a careful, deliberate effort to make Ryan feel safe and willing, to get him to commit, to come, to follow through. The question investigators immediately faced was, who was actually behind that account? The digital forensics work that followed became one of the most contested elements of the entire case. A Fairfax County detective named Miller was assigned to examine Christine's devices, her phone, her laptop, her accounts. His conclusion, documented in a formal report, was that there was no indication Christine had lost control of her devices during the period in question. She was active on her devices. She had consistent patterns of use, browsing email, activity in the hours she was typically awake. The FetLife account and the associated Gmail and Telegram accounts did not match her patterns, and critically, the account was never accessed during the times when only Christine was home alone. It was only ever active when Brendan or Juliana, or both, were in the house. Miller's report was sent for independent peer review to the University of Alabama, which is considered best practice in digital forensics. The reviewer agreed with his process and his findings. Then Miller was removed from the case, transferred out of the department, told, according to testimony from another detective, that he would never work on another digital forensics case in major crimes as long as a certain supervisor was there. The defense would later argue that this transfer proved the department had decided Brendan was guilty before the evidence was fully examined, that investigators were pressuring people to reach a predetermined conclusion. The prosecution's position was that the transfer was an internal personnel matter, and that the digital evidence, regardless of who reviewed it, pointed consistently away from Christine and toward the people living in that house with her. What the investigation did establish clearly, over months of forensic work, was that the blood at the scene told a different story than the one Brendan and Juliana had given police that morning. A blood spatter expert brought in to examine the scene found patterns that were not consistent with the version of events Brendan had described. Specifically, the blood on Joseph Ryan's hands and clothing. Brendan had claimed Ryan was actively stabbing Christine when he entered the room, that Ryan was the aggressor, armed and dangerous, but the blood on Ryan's hands and jeans told experts that the staining had been transferred there, not cast there. The patterns were described as finger-like, ribbon-like, consistent with someone placing blood on a surface rather than bleeding onto it actively. In plain terms, the blood on Ryan's body appeared to have been put there after he was already shot, after he was already dying. Brendan, the prosecution argued, had staged the scene, had taken Christine's blood and placed it on Ryan's hands and clothing to make it look like Ryan had been the one stabbing her. There was also the knife. Ryan had brought a kitchen knife, a small, relatively blunt domestic blade, the kind of thing you would bring to a staged scene, not to commit a brutal murder. Brendan's DNA was not on it. Ryan's DNA was found at the junction of the blade and the handle, exactly where you would expect it if Ryan had been holding it. But Brendan's fingerprints were not anywhere on it, and Ryan had a cut on his thumb, consistent, the medical examiner said, with someone who had gripped a knife. Brendan had no injuries on his hands, none. The investigation also established where everyone was in the minutes before and after the killings. Brendan was captured on McDonald's surveillance footage. Juliana's phone, GPS, and her Apple Watch step data tracked her movements. The laptop in the house, Christine's laptop, was accessed that morning after both Brendan and Juliana had left. The prosecution's reading of that evidence was that Christine was the only person in the house going about her morning with no knowledge of what was coming. The defense's reading was that it proved Christine had set the whole thing up herself. 7 months after the murders, in October of 2023, Juliana Perez Magalhaes was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Joseph Ryan's death. She had told police she fired the shot. That much was established. But investigators had known from early on that Juliana had not built this plan alone. The complexity of it, the digital setup, the catfishing, the choice of target, the staging of the scene, none of it fit the profile of a 21-year-old woman who barely spoke English and had no prior knowledge of American law enforcement procedures. Someone with investigative experience had designed this, someone who understood how crime scenes were read, how digital evidence was traced, how alibis were constructed. While Juliana sat in jail, she and Brendan continued to communicate through letters through his mother as an intermediary. The letters from those early months were loving. She told him she was not going to cooperate. She told him she would not say anything that hurt him. She told him she loved him more than anything. Brendan was still free. Over the months that followed, the tone of those letters shifted. Brendan stopped visiting. His mother stopped funding her legal representation. Juliana was alone in a foreign country, facing a murder charge, with a lawyer she was not sure she could trust, waiting for a trial that kept getting pushed back. The letters became more desperate. She wrote about not wanting to feel that way anymore. She was hospitalized at one point for her mental state, and then Brendan was arrested. On September 15th, 2024, 570 days after the murders, the blood evidence that had been collected at the scene came back with conclusions definitive enough to act on. The analysis confirmed what investigators had long believed: the staging of the crime scene, the placement of blood on Ryan's body, the wound pattern on Christine. All of it pointed to Brendan Banfield as the person who had stabbed his wife and attempted to frame a dead man for it. Brendan was taken into custody outside his home, the same home where Christine and Joseph Ryan had died, and charged with aggravated murder. Within weeks of his arrest, Juliana accepted a plea deal. She would plead guilty to manslaughter. She would testify against Brendan, and in exchange, prosecutors would recommend a sentence of time served, meaning she could potentially walk free once the trial was over. She flipped, and the case against Brendan Banfield went to trial. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 34 witnesses took the stand, and at the center of it all, as the prosecution had always known it would be, was Juliana Perez Magalhaes. She testified for 3 days. She described the affair, the plan, the target selection, the gun range visits, the morning of February 24th in detail that made the courtroom go quiet. She described watching Brendan shoot Joseph Ryan. She described watching him get on top of Christine and stab her. She described Christine's voice. She described what the room looked like. She also admitted, under cross-examination, that she had been negotiating a deal with a documentary production company while in jail, that she had written to her family in Brazil about potentially making over $100,000 from her story, that she had told them, her words, "We deserve something." The defense attacked her on every front. They argued she was a liar who had fabricated the entire story to save herself. They pointed to inconsistencies in what she remembered and what she could not. They noted that she had initially told police in multiple interviews that Brendan had never touched Joseph Ryan's body, and that this account had changed. They argued that the digital evidence properly read proved Christine had been the one behind the FetLife account all along. And then Brendan did something that surprised almost everyone in that courtroom. He took the stand in his own defense. For 2 days he testified. He described his marriage, his affairs, his relationship with Juliana, which he insisted had meant nothing serious to him. He described the morning of February the 24th in careful, flat detail. He described coming home, going through the basement, hearing sounds upstairs, drawing his weapon, entering the bedroom, finding Ryan with Christine. He said he shot Ryan because Ryan appeared to be stabbing his wife. He denied ever touching Ryan's body after the shooting. He denied setting up any account in Christine's name. He denied planning any of it. He also, notably, could not bring himself to call Christine a good mother without his eyes darting around the room. He described their shared life in a tone so flat and unaffected that observers and analysts watching the trial noted it repeatedly. When he talked about the affair with Juliana, the woman he claimed meant nothing to him. There was a visible shift, something closer to animation, something that looked to everyone watching like genuine feeling. He showed more warmth talking about a crumble cookie he had eaten in that McDonald's parking lot than he did talking about the woman he had been married to for nearly 20 years.
Mr. Banfield, a jury of your peers, after hearing all the evidence, has found you guilty of count 1 of the indictment 2024-666, aggravated murder of 2 people in the same act or transaction. They found you guilty of count 4 of 2024-666, aggravated murder of 2 people within a 3-year period, count 5 of 2024-666, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and count 1 of 2024-873, child endangerment. In accordance with Virginia law, although you have been found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder,
The jury deliberated for roughly 8.5 hours. They came back guilty on all counts. Aggravated murder of Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield as part of the same act. Use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Child endangerment because his 4-year-old daughter had been in that house, in that basement, while all of it happened above her. Brendan Banfield stood at the defense table and showed no emotion as the verdict was read. The sentencing hearing was held on June 5th, 2025. Before the judge spoke, the families were given their moment.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Danielle Hawker.
And what is your relationship to Christine?
She's my sister.
And do you have some testimony that you would like to present to the judge about the loss of Christine in your life?
I would.
Please go
Thank
ahead.
you. Again, my name is Danielle Hawker, and Christine Banfield is my younger sister.
And what they said in that courtroom deserves to be heard. Not summarized, not paraphrased. Heard. Christine's older sister, Danielle, stood before the court and spoke about a woman she had loved her entire life. She talked about growing up together, about being mistaken for twins, about Saturday nights waiting for their father to come home from his late shift, eating hot bagels, watching television on the floor, about Christine falling asleep at concerts, about Christine being the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone in it feel like they belonged there. She talked about what it felt like to get that phone call. Her parents had been driving to Virginia for an overnight visit. They were already on their way to see Christine when the news came. They spent hours on that drive calling family member after family member, delivering the same devastating news over and over again. No parent should ever have to do that once. They did it again and again. Danielle talked about the surgeries she faced in the months after Christine died. Serious medical procedures complicated by a bleeding disorder the two sisters shared, and how she went through them without her person, without the one who would have been holding her hand. She talked about Valerie, about how Christine's last thoughts in those final moments had to have been about her daughter, whether she had done enough, whether Valerie would be okay, not about Brendan, not about making sure he knew he was loved. And then she said something that cut through everything else in that room. I didn't truly know Brendan at all. I don't believe anyone did. Not family, not friends, and certainly not Christine. She described watching his testimony as the most self-serving display of narcissism she had ever witnessed. She said that hearing him attempt to rewrite Christine's life and character felt like losing her all over again, piece by piece, in a room where Christine could not defend herself. Joseph Ryan's mother, Deirdre Fisher, testified virtually. Her health had not allowed her to travel. She spoke about having Joe at 16, about fighting for the right to be part of his life, about the relationship they had built over the years, the phone calls, the holidays, the way he showed up for her when she was sick. She said she was the last person he called the night before he was murdered. He sent her a photo of himself that night. It was the last time she heard him say the word mom. She talked about how the trial had characterized her son, the intruder, the fetish guy, the forgettable one. How his face was barely shown during the proceedings. How Brendan had chosen him specifically because he thought Joe would make a convincing villain, disposable, easy to discredit, easy to bury under a false narrative. He had a face, she said. He had a name. He had a life. But Brendan Banfield shot his face, soiled his name, and treated his life as disposable. Joe's aunt, Sangeeta Ryan.
Hello, Honorable Judge Ascarati, members of the Fairfax County team, members of the gallery, our family, Christine's family, friends, and members of the press. We are Joe's family. We're the people he loved, and we loved him.
Stood and spoke for the family with a clarity and a steadiness that filled that courtroom. Let me be absolutely clear, she said. This was not a moment of weakness, confusion, or loss of control. This was a deliberate, planned act carried out by someone who believed he could outsmart the system and escape accountability. She said the family did not forgive him. She said Joe's chair would remain empty at their gatherings, but that his presence would never truly leave them. And she said that today, that day, the family was taking back Joe and Christine's memory from the lies, from the manipulation, and from the man who thought he could control their story even after taking their lives. Then Brendan spoke. He stood before the judge, before the families of the people he had killed, and he maintained his innocence. He walked through the digital evidence. He questioned the catfish theory. He cited forensic reports. He said the system had failed him. He said it was impossible for him to have committed the crime the way the prosecution described. He said Christine was a wonderful and loving person, a caring mother, a caring wife, a loving nurse. And then he said, I am not responsible for her death. This is not a knife I ever held in my hand, and I never stabbed her. The room heard him out, and then Judge Penny Ascarat spoke. She had been on the bench for 18 years. She said that in the vast majority of cases she had sentenced, people who made terrible decisions in moments of anger, people struggling with addiction, people who were not inherently bad, but who had done something they could not undo. Sentencing weighed on her. Long after the hearing was over, she said this was not one of those cases. Only twice before in her 18 years had she encountered something different. Two individuals who carried no remorse, who had calculated and planned their crimes, who had left devastation in their path without a moment of genuine reflection. She said she was looking at that same kind of person again. She described what she believed Christine had experienced in her final moments, believing Brendan had come to rescue her, and then realizing as he stood over her with the knife that he was the one who had done all of it, that her final thoughts in those seconds had been about Valerie. She looked at Brendan and told him that his decision to testify in his own defense had shown the court that he still believed he was the smartest person in the room. She said she hoped that one day he would become tortured by what he had done, but that nothing she had seen suggested he would. The level of cruelty,
The level of cruelty, calculation, and inhumanity in this case reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse. It reflects evil, which is why I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life. On count 1 of 2024-666 aggravated murder, I sentence you to life in the penitentiary for the rest of your natural life without the possibility of parole, without good conduct allowances, or any earned sentence credits or conditional release. On count 5 of 2024-666, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, I sentence you to 3 years in the penitentiary, which is a mandatory term and cannot be suspended. Since it is required by statute, an additional 6 months is ordered and suspended for post-release probation, which is a nullity in this case, but is required to be part of the sentence. On count 1 of 2024-873, child endangerment, I sentence you to 5 years in the penitentiary.
And inhumanity in this case reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse, she said. It reflects evil, which is why I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life. Brendan Banfield was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No good conduct allowances, no earned sentence credits, no conditional release. Consecutive additional sentences for the firearms conviction and the child endangerment charge. He stood there and showed nothing. Juliana Perez Magalhaes, despite the prosecution's recommendation of time served, was sentenced separately to 10 years, the maximum the judge could impose. The judge told her directly that she did not deserve anything other than incarceration and a life of reflection, that she had brought Joseph Ryan to his death knowing full well what she was doing, that it should weigh on her soul. 2 people went into that house on February 24th, 2023, not knowing they were about to die. One of them had been carefully chosen. The other had spent her whole life building something, a career, a family, a daughter she adored, and had no idea the person she shared a bed with had spent months engineering her end. Christine Banfield will never see Valerie's first day of school. She will not be there for field trips or recitals or the 1,000 ordinary moments that add up to a childhood. She will not be there when her daughter becomes a teenager and needs her mother in the specific way that only mothers can answer. Valerie was 4 years old when she lost Christine. She will grow up knowing her mother through photographs.
Former co-worker Christine Banfield.
She loved motherhood with her entire heart, and she brought that into her work.
Photographs and stories told by the people who loved her. Joseph Ryan will not get married. He will not become a father. His grandmother Connie, who raised him from days old, carries a grief that has only deepened with time. His dog Kitty waited for him at the top of the stairs. These are the costs of what Brendan Banfield decided to do. Not abstractions, not statistics. Real people, real absence. Real chairs left empty at real tables. What this case asks us to sit with, beyond the planning, beyond the betrayal, beyond the sheer audacity of a man who thought he could build a perfect crime and walk away from it, is the question of proximity. The people closest to Christine did not see it coming. Her sister replayed moments in her mind for years, trying to find the clue she missed. There was no clue. There was a man who had perfected the performance of normalcy while building something monstrous underneath it. And the people who loved Christine were never going to see it because he made sure they could not. Brendan Banfield will spend the rest of his natural life in a Virginia prison. He is 41 years old, and somewhere, a little girl named Valerie is growing up, surrounded by people who are doing everything they can to make sure she knows who her mother was, not through the weight of what was taken, through the joy of what Christine gave, her laugh, her warmth, her enormous heart. That is the part he did not plan for, the part that survives him. That is the story of Christine Banfield, Joseph Ryan, and the man who believed he was smarter than everyone around him, right up until a jury of 12 people told him otherwise. If this case stayed with you, and I think it will, share it with someone. These are the stories that do not always make the front page for long, but they deserve to be remembered. The victims deserve to be remembered. This is Beyond Dark Cases. If you are new here, subscribe. There is more where this came from. If you have been here, you already know what we do. Leave a comment and tell me what you think about this case. I read every single one, and I will see you in the next one.